everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today, on this day, this beautiful, wonderful day, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Wayne Dawson. He is a personal coach. Let me make sure I read this right, because I pulled this right from the website. His journey is to help men of color and those who love and support them in resolving midlife challenges so that they may become unstuck and live a life with sense of purpose. So, Mr. Dawson, first and foremost, welcome to the show today. Thank you for making time for me.
Thank you so much for having me, Lena. I certainly appreciate it.
Awesome, awesome. Now, as I was reading there, to help men of color and process male midlife crisis, those are very two unique dynamics. How does that become your soapbox issue?
Well, I have ridden through the crisis. There is a crisis in several actually that happens prior to midlife. We know that teenagers, if you have a teen, I don't know if you have children, I have raised four of my own, and now I'm in a second marriage. And so we are in fact raising together a blended family. One of the things that you'll find with teenagers is that they are going through finding themselves. And so if you have a teen who talks back to you, a teen who is searching and somehow pushing back, it's because it's a normal behavior to find themselves and therefore, as it were, reject what was given to them as far as identity and values. And so that's a crisis that they're going through. But then there's also what we call a quarter life crisis. And that is typically at the end of college and the entry into the workplace, when men and women are trying to find themselves in terms of meeting, according to Maslow, the hierarchical needs, the level of basic necessities, food, housing, and shelter, clothing. Also security in terms of securing their first home, first property, perhaps thinking about starting a family. There's this challenge as well to fit in, to become significant in the workplace, and to use up the money that they've spent throughout to educate themselves. That is also a crisis that they go through. And it's called the quarter life crisis. Happens typically between, say, 27 or 26, and I would say about 35 when they're trying to settle in. So what I have done is I have been and had been a youth development specialist for over 2 decades as a national trainer for Boys and Girls Club in youth development and a speaker throughout the nation on youth development, raising my own kids. So I've gone through that and I'm sort of graduating now, as it were. That space still needs to be filled. I have just decided, because I have myself transitioned as a man through all of those successfully, and being a life coach was a natural piece for me, having had a career where I was a trainer, a corporate trainer. And so I saw the need to fill that gap, because you know what? Little boys grow into grown men. And so if you haven't yet managed at the level of youth, the ills, they will grow into men that have the same ills. And I think, it's necessary to clip the wings and work, because half life, as it's called for many men, doesn't have to be as bad or the same the second half.
The second half. Okay. Now, as I was getting ready for the show, I was reading up on male midlife crisis, because, we have this stereotype, this guy, 50 or 60 years old, he goes out and buys a sports car and starts dating women that are, 20 years old. But, it expresses itself in different ways, right? Yes. And you mentioned that you went through it sort of yourself. So what might it look like? Because it's not really always the fast car and the young girl, right?
No, it's a challenge of the questions. I use the acronym VIP deliberately for purpose, because I think the platform is identifying values, core values, identity, sense of self, who am I, and purpose. And I think we go through that, especially at the midlife level, we start seeking. Maslow talks also about the tiers that are becoming more sophisticated as you pass the first two, and those start dealing with sense of belonging and relevance. You know, and so what's happening is we have spent the earlier part of our lives, typically maybe around 40, we might think about it before, but by 40 for sure, we're beginning to compare ourselves with our peers, those that are doing well in our mind. We also begin to look at the fact that we're vulnerable because we start having parents that are passing, friends that are passing, and we recognize that life is so fragile. And for the most part, 80%, according to a Gallup poll, states that most people hate their jobs. So we have spent a lifetime, an early lifetime, just especially for Black men, meeting survival needs. And now it's time to become relevant, to find fulfillment. And so we begin to question our worth, our value, and our abilities, and start. That's when we have the issues, as you mentioned earlier, with getting in the car and the young girls and looking at the wife very differently, going to the gym and, you know, starting exploring.
Now, we're talking about men of color and male midlife crisis, and you're talking about self-identity and, you know, this need to you find yourself unfulfilled because you've been in a job for years to take care of the family. How isn't that, I mean, white, black, green, purple with polka dots? I mean, isn't that the same? Why is it unique, or what is unique about the Black man's experience when it comes to this male midlife crisis? Because it sounds like this is something that all of you guys would go through, right? No?
We all go through, but we go through with different levels of intensity. For example, what we have to struggle through for the most part, most of us are not gifted in terms of giving a legacy from our fathers. We have to struggle, as they say, to get through it. Because our Black experience in North America is one where we are always playing catch up. The race started long before we were able to get to the starting gate. And so we're always in this need to get through basic survival. So we work twice as hard to receive half of the proceeds, so to speak. So it takes a slightly different turn, because even as we get older, we know right now, for example, in the Black community, Black adult women are outnumbering our males in terms of graduation from college and education. So we're not only competing with the white system that has set us up always to start at the bottom tier, but we're now competing with the female who has been truly empowered, rightly so, and timely. But we're so far behind in terms of progress, so that by the time we get to midlife, we have all this excessive baggage that we have to deal with.
Okay, good point. I understand what you're saying. Now, I'm listening to you talk about this, and I'm also listening to the accent. So I'm hoping the audience can tell that you are from Jamaica. But before we opened up, you did say you spent most of a lot of time, a large bulk of time in New York.
Absolutely.
I am wondering, just curious, as a Black man who's Jamaican, who happened to live a lot of time in New York, do you think that Black men go through midlife crisis in Jamaica the same way they do here in America, or is it a total different dynamic?
No, we go through it because one of the things that, like they say, we came to these lands on different ships, but we're all in the same boat. So there's that colonial experience. And sadly, a lot of my brothers and sisters are not heartened and awakened to the fact that their experience is similar, even though they have not seen it as overtly as we are in North America, in the USA. So we still have an education that is misguided. We still have a religion and a figurehead that's misdirected. And so we have learned to settle with the colonial master. And sometimes we hate ourselves and don't even understand it. But truly, even in Jamaica, if you follow the money, Jamaicans, my brethren always say that there is no true racism in Jamaica. but it's a classism issue. And I hear that all the time. That's the sense of just not knowing, because if you follow the money, oftentimes in Jamaica, when I grew up, they used to say there were like 7 or 8 families that ran Jamaica. And these are not purely African brothers and sisters in terms of their heritage. So even if you follow the money in terms of the class, it takes you in the same direction where it's here. The racism is very insidious everywhere you go. In Jamaica, it is so veiled that many folks are partnering in it and don't even realize it. We tend to, talk about beautiful straight hair.
Oh, the same issues. Yes.
Good hair,
Good hair, bad hair, light skin, dark skin, whole issues. Yes. Okay. Yes. I have been blessed throughout the course of my life to have a few Jamaican families adopt me as their own. And it is truly a wonderful experience because family is very important.
Absolutely.
They're very large. They tend to be very large and they feed you. And so food is my food is my thing. So let me get back on track here. For us that love you guys, that surround you guys, and I'm thinking more specifically the romantic partnership. So the women who love you guys that are going through this process. You guys can be very difficult, very pig-headed. So how do we kind of tap you on the shoulder and say, honey, I think you're kind of going through something here. You want to talk about it. You maybe want to get some help or what, because a lot of times as a man, I'm a man. No, I don't need no help. I got it, whatever. How do I help you transition through this process?
Yeah, it's very hard. One of the easiest ways and the first level in terms of change happens in terms of the environment. And so, it's firstly the environment, and then we talk about behavior, then capabilities, and so forth, and then identity. And then we move to the next level, which is spirituality, in terms of how you change someone. But the most impactful would be at the top. If somebody's spirituality changes, meaning their sense of value based on their spiritual relationship, if that changes, it pretty much works very quickly down the line. If you have to work, and I say environment because, for example, if somebody has been on the streets and that's their hustle and they got locked up, it's very likely that if they are released and back in the same community with the same environment, the same people, that they're likely to get in the same situations. So a good structure for that would be to move people into a new environment. And if you can't, then you change your friend and change the environment around you. The same is true in terms of women who support or partners in whatever way that support the men that we're speaking to. Changing the environment, which means if you sense there's hostility in the home, one of the things that you can do is not to personalize it as much as that's possible, that's difficult rather, to sort of send a message to make sure that the male in the family, the man that we're talking about, feels like the king that he wants to feel. There's a lot of issues around self-concept, self-ideal, and it's important that if you have people around that are not supportive of the male because he is, let's say, in-laws, it might be important to kind of shelter him from the in-laws until he's feeling better about himself, if they're going to be critical. So it's not to avoid or slip under the rug the fact that there is a problem, but find ways of supporting that with the environment, the sort of television shows that you might want to watch or not watch. In my home, for example, we don't even have a television in the bedroom because we think that's an opportunity to do things together as a couple, to read, to spend time, for me to extol my love to the queen in my home and for her to make me feel like a king. So there are things that are conscientious, that and deliberate and intentional that has to happen. So there's some work that needs to take place. And we're not trying to let men slip away and not be accountable. We're just saying that, it's gentle.
Gentle, be gentle. Okay. Listening to you talking, I guess I should have asked this question in the opening. You personally, what was your aha moment? Like, I'm going through something here. I need to make some adjust. Something's not right with Wayne. I need to fix this.
Yeah. So I had quite an aha moment. Um, I remember going through about my 40th birthday and having my ex and I had reason to fall out because she declared to me that she was gay. And I had, prior to her declaration, I would say I brought it on, but I was cheating on her with a younger woman. And at the time, I realized that at that moment that it was important for me to set a standard for my kids, to make them understand that this was unacceptable behavior. And I had to also, and I went through a lot. I literally, for a while, was out there, you know, with all the achievements that I've had to date. I was beginning to smell myself, as they say. And, you know, when I went out and totally went against the rules, so to speak, I paid dearly for it. Again, it was an eye opener to realize that I shouldn't take life for granted, that the people that were endeared to me were not necessarily there for keeps. And I had to do my work. Well, when she made the declaration, I had to go deep inside. I spent more than a year in therapy, which is something I advise for all men, by the way, to have a secondary eye and ear to their issues. And we have stigmas about therapy in our community. Currently, I have 4 coaches, by the way, for different areas. So I believe in that. And I, for a while, was living with a friend from college in his mother's basement. So horrific that was in New York, that when it rained, like it's right now, filth came in the basement area. And I decided that that was not going to be me. That was not what I had created for myself and wanted. And I learned to cook, really learned to cook, because I used to be dependent on my ex to cook for me. But now that we're coming, one thing I made it a point to do was to make sure that despite everything, the kids were sheltered from the pain that was happening and the bickering between us both. Today, you know, having discovered that that was an issue and I had to take care of me and to be the best father that I could, despite all of that, I also became her buddy in time, became her partner. So every graduation, everything that happens as a family, my wife is there, she's there, her wife is there, and all the kids are present. And it took myself to be kicked really hard to recognize that I had to bring it back home. And my second half was not going to be my first. Life after 40 for me was going to be a lot better than life had been then. So, you know, that was a
beautiful evolution. I mean, all aspects of the testimony are beautiful. I mean, to be able to get to a point in a relationship that splits, but we're still friends. We're going to co-parent. We're going to raise the kids together. That's beautiful. I mean, just the personal evolution, because some people never get there. I know men and women, a lot of men that are just angry and bitter and miserable, and they're 70 because they're at the end of the journey and they're like, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. And you don't want to get to that place where you're looking at your life and saying, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. That's something. But what I heard in there is that you experienced this at 40. Is that generally the age?
Yeah, I think it depends on, I was a mama's boy, and my father, I lost my mom approximately 10 years now, and my dad 20 years to the day prior to that. They were together for over 40 years. And in my family, my sisters both have ringed past 40 years of togetherness with their one love since college. So I know what that means. So I'm not one to talk about the rags to riches where I was out there eating from the cans. My superpower was family love. And I've always called on that. So when I talk about values, identity, and purpose, that's what it is. Unfortunately, most of us are so busy trying to make a mark and to satisfy the expectation of others in our 20s and even 30s that it doesn't hit us yet. I mean, I have teen sons who think they're superhuman beings. You know, it's pouring outside and they're out, and I'm saying, be careful. You don't want to get yourself all sick out there. At least bring your defensive down so you get sick. And they don't see that ever happening. As
They're
you know,
like, oh, Dad, I got this, Dad. I got this, Dad.
yeah, right here in South Beach, Florida, when everybody else was still locking down at spring break, and these young people came out in their thousands. Nobody was practicing PPEs. They thought they're invincible. So that's the period, I think, where we're still testing and figuring out who we really are. And then all of a sudden, we recognize that the clock is ticking. Our bodies don't work as much and or as well in many cases. We have allowed the years of abuse, no sleep and partying, it's beginning to show. And all of a sudden, we have the issue of security in terms of what's going to happen tomorrow when you're not at your height in terms of performance for work and bringing money in, which is traditionally what's thought. However, we're realizing today that people are retiring later and later. So you actually can push yourself for later. And so I think at about, and the average for men, for Black men, it's almost 10 years less than for our white counterparts in terms of us dying prematurely. And because, again, our system is set up in such a way that we're on the front line. We don't have the right sort of insurance and coverages. And traditionally, we show strength by standing on our own and not sharing. So if we feel pain, we typically hold on to it or take a drink to get rid of it. So a lot of stuff is preventable. But at 40 or thereabouts, we begin to recognize our vulnerabilities. Our friend that we went to school with, we just buried them. Sometimes our parents or our own kids show that life is frail. We begin to start thinking about the second half in a different way. And, the body, the mind, and everything around us oftentimes begins to remind us that we have to do something about adjusting.
The king, the lion, he starts to say, I can't hunt as fast as I used to anymore.
It's all preventable to some extent.
Yes, indeed. Take care of your, and on a sidebar issue, Black men have higher rates of, high blood pressure and all of that stuff. But I think that has to do with a lot of the stressors that you guys are dealing with. And, in our communities, we tend not to have the best food options or be taught about the best food options. So that contributes to it as well. So that could add to the whole dynamic of everything as well. I'm assuming. I'm just out there on a limb.
I think you're on the money, Lena. Absolutely. A real estate agent told me a long time ago when I was shopping around for a home, he said, see this neighborhood? Had a Popeye, a McDonald's, a Wendy, all of the fast foods in one square block. He says, this is not the neighborhood you want to raise your kids. Then we went into a more middle class, perhaps more white. And I don't believe that Black folks need to be trying to pass and want to be in white neighborhoods. I think there are enough affluent Blacks in neighborhoods that you can raise your kids and still keep the culture intact. And not have the police called on you because you bought a new car. But I think one of the things that you do when you look for neighborhoods, for example, is you want to see where you have a variety of cuisines in terms of ethnic cuisines. That tells you something about a neighborhood. And I say that to support what you said, that a lot of what we see in terms of the ailments to us comes out of the environmental racism, the foods, the water we drink, the air we breathe,
Yes. A lot of our communities are food deserts. Like you said, there's nothing but fast food options in a lot of our communities. But let me circle back because I could get to talking about that for a very long time. You've mentioned quite a few times that as we've been talking, VIP. You have a company called VIP Transformative Living,
Yes,
correct?
VIP Transformative Living LLC. Yes.
So what do you do over there?
So at VIP right now, in another couple of weeks, I'm actually about to. First of all, let me just share that I have had a pretty good stay in both corporate America and non-for-profit in leadership for quite a while. But one thing I recognized during COVID is that some of the dreams that I have had, and my vision board is right in front of me here. I've had my vision board that I've altered a little bit in the last 17 years, but it still stands. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I was living somebody else's dream. Mm-hmm. I worked for a corporate 50 and did a lot of work for them. But here, the key, I did a lot of work for them, which meant that my own dreams were being stalled. My friend Sean Dove says, stop stalling your calling. And so I realized that I had a call, and the call was, I believe that, and which is why this company was founded on January 1st this year. Okay. I fired corporate America in February 5th this year, and launched my first work in terms of being present a month later in social media. And currently I'm preparing online courses and will be speaking, and I'm currently working with men around the area of coaching around midlife issues. But I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that it is the birthright of all men of color to live a life of fulfillment and significance.
Great. Because I don't think they realize that they are supposed to live that way.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. The narrative has got to be ours to tell and change.
I love that. Now, let me continue with this birthright men of color. You're down in Florida. We discussed that earlier, and Florida just passed some legislation that kind of hits me the wrong way, but I don't want to get into that. But one piece I want to get into is men of color need safe spaces. They need areas where people around them understand the day-to-day struggles that they have, just getting out the door and getting back home. For men of color, possibly going through midlife crisis, when they can't find Coach Wayne, how do they find safe spaces and understanding? Like, I can't carry all this mental weight. I'm having problems carrying all this mental weight.
Yeah. So I think in my entire life, one of the things that I attribute to my success is the fact that I've always had a mentor, and always, in every step of the way. And I pay for some of those now in the way of coaches, but I still have mentors. And some of my mentors are peer mentors. That is to say, sometimes we think of people in a way that's untouchable, unreachable, and we wish that we aspire to, and so we don't make a move. But most people would be flattered if you said to them, I appreciate and admire what you do. Can you take me under your wings? Can I meet with you once a week? Can I call you to ask you how to step, how to walk? The psychology of a male, and I want to here stop to applaud all of the single mothers who have done a tremendous job all over this country raising their children, boys especially, but their children across the board. But I'll say one thing, Lena, the psychology of a male is different than that of a female. So you can raise a child, a young man, for example, to be a good boy. But it's difficult to have him understand the psychology of the men that he ought to become. And so it's so different. And so it's important that I think there are organizations and groups that men should be a part of. That's important. It's part of our ancient African tradition. There are times where men stand with men, and that's still important and should be, and women stand with women. I think it's important that we identify, even in our small spheres, other brothers that we aspire to and we admire based on their values, their sense, again, VIP, their sense of self, identity. And these are mission-driven brothers with a purpose.
Purpose. Sometimes I've been fortunate to sit in some barbershops and listen to you guys talk, and I'm like, you guys give bad advice to each other. This guy has no purpose. He has, and you, yeah, man, I think I'm gonna do that. Sometimes you find the wrong peers to attach yourself to.
Right. But there are coalitions and there are groups.
Yes.
And I know if you're in social media right now, you can discern by visiting, and feel free to leave. And again, that is available to us all now. By the way, I have in front of me several mentors, you know, in the way of books, you know, and so a lot of what we need to do doesn't, and a lot of these are written by white men in terms of the common elements, but then I have a lot that are written by brothers that speaks to our particulars. And so you can have a mentor or a mentoring relationship through the books you read and the podcast.
Yes. Good point. What you are intaking into your mind. It doesn't have to actually be a physical person. Good point. I want to ask you one more question before I wrap it up here. Because you mentioned earlier that you had spent some time doing youth mentoring.
Yeah, I was in Harlem for maybe 17 years, running the flagship site of the Children's Aid, which is a Boys and Girls Club.
Okay, so knowing what you know now, experiencing what you have experienced, if you're sitting down with a young guy, 20, 25, what would you say to him to possibly minimize his midlife crisis ordeal, or assist him in better transitioning through it?
Yeah. It's oftentimes, it would be premature if psychologically the person isn't there, because sometimes you have to be in there to understand it, in the midst of the storm, to know and feel the wind on your skin. But I would say that what's important along the way is that you seek counsel and advice. We need to move away from the narrative and which is why I think the new terminology of toxic masculinity has come up. We were taught that men don't show their inner self, their frailties, that, you know, there's one of the books I am reading that says something like, throw like a girl, which says that if you are not a jock, then there's something sissified about that. And there's something wrong with showing your emotional intelligence. I would say that part of being okay with yourself, and not therefore to enter that period, which doesn't have to be a crisis for everybody, by the way, is to normalize the behaviors that along the way may not meet your so-called society's standard. Gotcha. So if you don't join the basketball team and you'd rather be a scorer or be in the library, oh, you know, I don't know if libraries are still operating. But if you would rather do something else, it is okay for that behavior. So you don't put extra pressure on yourself. And that way you can allow the so-called nose that society rains on you to not affect you in a negative way. You can build yourself and know that this is true, and another part of your holistic dimension as a male.
Gotcha.
Don't get boxed in with these labels as a male. Don't get boxed in. It's okay if your wife makes more money than you. It's okay that you are at home preparing dinner for her and the family while she's out earning. It's all okay. And so you don't have to fight against the wave when you take a look at 40 and beyond and start. But what's important is that I think it's important that you live your truth as well. the millennials and the Zers are teaching us that. Because I grew up in a generation, I'm last of the baby boomers. I'm 59 this year. But my father and others grew up with that idea of get a good education, work hard, and keep a good job. The truth is, who works harder than the black man has worked historically in America. So
for free.
For free. So that mythology or fallacy doesn't sit for us. And the truth is that the younger generations are teaching us that you follow your passions. There's some other things that they want to work on, but in following your passion, it allows you therefore to live out the dreams. Be an entrepreneur if that's your spirit, and give it a shot. That way you don't spend a lifetime later on looking back with regrets.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
And there's so much pressure, societal pressure on being a boy, and like you said, you have to be a jock and throw the ball. But I've encountered young boys that I prefer to do other things that are not traditionally considered being a male, but I'm scared to do them because what other people will think, and you don't want to get pigeonholed into that. It just really transforms your whole life when you don't live in your truth, walk in your truth, be your truth. Yes. So let's do this random question. See what we got here.
I like that.
What is the worst purchase that you've ever made?
It may be, it actually is a service, online service during the period. I mean, we have been seeing an escalation of boxes at my door since COVID. And it may actually have been, my wife and I are vegans. And so we were purchasing because she's a psychologist and I'm working from home. I've created a studio and an office here, and she works outside of the home oftentimes. And so, when she's seen her clients, traditionally we come home and we break bread and we do that together, but the schedule has changed somewhat. And so she came up with this wonderful idea that we're going to start ordering these deliveries, boxed deliveries.
A Jamaican who's vegan, so we have no curried goat, no oxtails, no what is it, that shrimp on the side of the road that you get?
Pepper shrimp.
Yes, so no pepper shrimp.
No.
Oh, wow.
Very and very strict in terms of my regime for activities, working out, and dieting. I'm not one that truly believes in dieting. My wife does diets from time to time, but because I think if you can't sustain it, then it's going to be pointless. So for me, if it's sustainable in terms of a habit form, it's okay. So I used to be a vegetarian years ago, a pescatarian who ate seafood since I came to Florida. And a few Thanksgivings ago, I said to my wife, honey, I'm back. I can't do it. And so we changed. But part of what I do when I work with men in terms of their physical issue, I help them to change a few habits that turns around the clock. I've been able to reverse cholesterol and other metrics that I was told I was predestined to have as the other men in my family. And by changing certain habits, I totally erase that. Yeah.
That's right. Our eating habits have been handed down to us, and a lot of that is killing us. So, but I'm so glad to see the movement within our culture. A lot of us are going vegan and vegetarian and really conscious of our eating habits. So that's a transition that I see in today's generation. And I'm so very happy for that. Coach Wayne, please tell us how we could connect with you and get the guys on board and help this midlife crisis be a little easier for them. How do we get in touch with you?
Sure. On my website, which is viptransformativeliving.com, are links to both my Facebook page, and which is VIP Transformative Living, and my Instagram, which is at coachwayne.vip, and my LinkedIn as well. So all one would need to do is to get on there and subscribe or leave me some information through DM. I am more than happy to reach out. First time I'd meet with someone, it's all ears. I'm just listening and helping people as they develop a relationship to understand why they're not meeting the goals that they had set for themselves in terms of limiting beliefs. And then we take it from there.
Awesome. So we're going to see if we can get some more men folk your way. It is so important for our men to see other men investing in them, dedicating themselves to them. And young boys, teenagers need to know somebody's out there saying, I'm willing to walk you through this journey, help you, take you by the hand and help you walk through this journey. Because sometimes I'm not a man and I'm not a Black man, but I know it's heavy. I know it's a lot of weight. And sometimes you're just looking around like, can somebody help me get through this? I don't know how I'm going to get through this. So I'm just so appreciative for, men like you out there that are putting in the work for.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Coach Wayne, I truly appreciate you making time for me. As I said before, time is a gift. Once you give it, you cannot give it back. So I truly, truly appreciate when you guys sit down and talk to me about what you're doing and let me pry into your life. I really appreciate that. So thank you for hanging out with me. And I wish you continued success.
Thank you. It's been my esteemed pleasure. I'm very humbled by the fact that you reached out. And I certainly want to celebrate and thank you for the work you're doing to elevate and to bring to the platform, the public platform, men who are doing the work. Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Thank you. Well, that is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.